What are my top money losing mistakes that I have made as a 7-figure Etsy and Shopify seller? If you've been following this channel for the last few years, you'll know that I've been documenting all of my wins and all my losses on this channel. And you better believe that as a serial entrepreneur, there is a lot of losses, mistakes, whatever you want to call them. Honestly, they're really lessons. So it kind of contributes to that identity capital, to your serial entrepreneur expertise in a way, I guess you could say, as you grow as a business owner. And I guess that's kind of how we have to look at it, as lessons, as making our skin thicker and preparing us for a better future, basically. So that's why in this video, we're gonna go over my top 5 biggest mistakes that I've made. And I'm gonna organize these from the least profit losing to the most profit losing mistake that I've made as a e-commerce entrepreneur. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome back, guys. If you're new to the channel, my name's Hannah. I teach people how to build brands mainly on Etsy, but also Shopify, but a lot of other entrepreneurial stuff as well. So if that is what you're into, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. So just preference this for a second. When you're going to open up a business selling physical goods, now if you're somebody that does print on demand or you sell digital assets, it's a little bit different because you're in a very low barrier of entry niche where you don't have much risk in a sense, because you don't have to pay for the product until it sells, or a digital asset that just doesn't have a cost at all. I don't do either of those models. And so when I was first starting out in my e-commerce business, I was doing every single thing made to order. So the first biggest mistake is that I didn't move from made to order to inventory sooner. Now, why was this a mistake? This is a mistake because, as you know, if you're somebody that's making to order currently, or maybe making to order and doing a personalization component to the product, right? The goal for anybody's business selling physical goods, I would imagine, would be to build a scalable business, right? And when you're working reactionary to orders coming in, you hit a ceiling a lot faster than if you were preparing for orders and holding inventory up front. And this forced me to hit a ceiling, so I actually couldn't grow anymore because my whole entire day was making the order, basically. And when you think about your business and you think of your business as an engine, right? Whether it's your customer service, your fulfillment, your research and development, your product launch, whatever it is, right? Your business has all these pieces of its engine, right? What you want to be preparing for is that each part of the engine has a system and a series of SOP or standard operating procedures that it follows. Like most of us, I wasn't really thinking systemically about my business and how to build a scalable business. And sometimes when you try to do this, you find that you have to actually change parts of your business, whether that's what you're selling or how you're getting the product or how you're getting the materials, stuff like that, right? And you actually have to change parts of your engine, tweak them to make sure that it's scalable if you're trying to forward think of, can I really make this a 7-figure business, right? And in the beginning, like I said, I wasn't really doing that. I wasn't putting scalable processes in place so then if I hired an employee, I could say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? And I could hand a manual to my employee and say, here, make this thing or design this thing, right? There was none of that in place. And that's completely normal. I definitely would have been able to scale a lot farther sooner than what I did. Second mistake kind of goes hand in hand with the first one as far as systems go, was skewing my items. So when you're making your Etsy listings, you have the opportunity to give your listing something called a SKU. A SKU stands for stock keeping unit, and it's an identification number that you give to not just your product listings, but every single product variation option that you have. So if you're selling, scrunchies in black in size small, a small black scrunchie would have its own unique identification code. Again, if you're selling in print on demand with like Printify or Printful, they are actually already skewing your variations for you. So you don't even have to worry about this. But arguably even digital assets, you would actually want to go ahead and give all your variation options a skew too, because you want to be able to track what you're actually selling at the end of the month, right? So if you're POD, you don't need to worry about this, but if you're like me and you hold everything in-house, right, every single item, every variation option should have a skew. Now, a skew does two things. The first thing that it does is it helps you identify your item outside just your product listing title and the product listing image, right? So at the end of the month, if I want to know how many small black scrunchies I sold on a SKU level, I can go into my Etsy reports, pull a report, and actually see how many I sold on a SKU level, right? You can go into your stats and see what listings sell the most, but on a SKU basis, you can't see actually how much you sold, because as you know on Etsy, you can sell the same product in multiple listings, right? So at least if you're tracking it by SKU, you can track how much of each item you're actually selling. Now, that is one thing that a SKU does. Number two, what a SKU does is a SKU is normally associated with something called a cost of goods sold. A cost of goods sold is the cost of your landed, finished, completed, packaged product before it ships to your customer. So that includes material costs, potential labor costs that were associated with making the item, packaging costs, so packaging is lumped into that, right? Basically every single cost that's associated with the finished product of that item. And so at the end of the month, when you do your profit and loss statement, you should end up with something called a cost of goods sold column, where every single sale that happened that month is associated with those SKUs that I mentioned earlier, right? So you can see at the end of the month what the cost was associated with the sale of your item. So for instance, you know, the improper way to be looking at your P&L from a very strategic high level would be you spent $150,000 that month on all your expenses, on materials, on labor, on office, on marketing costs, on merchant fees, on seller fees, right? You spent $150,000, but let's say you made $100,000 in revenue. That doesn't mean then that you're negative $50,000 that month. No, that is the incorrect way to be viewing your business from a higher perspective and seeing what's actually going on in your business, right? Because a huge portion of that, maybe $80,000 of that cost for that month, of that $150,000 was inventory or materials, right? And so that is why it's really important to make sure that you're skewing your products, so then you can associate that SKU with a cost of goods sold. So then when you do a P&L report, a profit and loss statement, you can see how much you sold on a SKU basis. So imagine someone like me, I got my organization up to 600 variations of products, and we literally had no way to track inventory or no SKU system in place. So I basically had to use a bunch of labor costs to have my employees at the time go backtrack and go back to step one before we progress to step 100 or wherever we're headed, and essentially spend a lot of money on employees to help me restructure the whole SKU system inside my organization. I can't really put an exact number to how big this is, but probably a lot of money, since it took us like a full month to really get our inventory in place and get a SKU system in place on 600 variation options of products. This leads me to my third profit losing mistake, which is not hiring employees sooner. Obviously, you don't know what you don't know when you were first starting out. When I started my business, I had no friends. I didn't really have colleagues that were entrepreneurs. I didn't even know really any other Etsy merchants, right? Like nowadays, all the main Etsy YouTubers, like we're pretty much all friends. Like we're all in like group chats. I didn't really have any other businesses or mentors or guidance to go off of, or KPIs, key performance indicators, right? So you just don't know what you don't know. And so when I look back, something that I really could have implemented way sooner was having employees. So one thing that really helped me with this and knowing when to hire employees is I read a book called Traction. And Traction basically says that in your standard workday, say your standard workday is 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, whatever the amount of hours you work on a daily average, right? If your standard workday requires more than 100%, let's say 120% to just maintain the engine of your business, to keep it running and growing, that 20% needs to start getting offloaded to somebody else. So if you have to put in 120 or 150% just to keep that same engine going, it's time to offload that 50 or that 20% to somebody somebody else. And that's the key performance indicator of when it's like a ding, 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 it's time to hire some help. Now, I would say I was probably working at 200% and I still hadn't hired any help. So essentially it required me a 200% effort just to maintain the engine. And honestly, I was maintaining the engine, but I was missing a huge component, which was growing the engine, because I had hit a ceiling, because it required so much effort of my daily hours, 7 days a week, like probably 9 to 10 hours a day in the beginning, to just keep the engine going, that I couldn't even focus on more growth of the business. So I hit a ceiling. So Traction makes it very black and white on when to hire, when to fire, how to make sure that you're getting the right people in the right seats. Another mistake that I made is, like most people, when you go out and hire employees for the first time, you hire your friends or you ask your sister or anybody for help because you just need help. I would have actually gone through a qualification process and hired the right people and got them in the right seats sooner, because I definitely invested a lot of money in unqualified employees, and I just didn't vet them quite well. So I would recommend reading Traction, because like I said, it literally makes everything about your business structure and building a company culture. Even if you're only looking for your first employee, I highly recommend you read the book. This leads me to my fourth profit-losing mistake, which is my second biggest profit-losing mistake, which is blindly launching products without data. What I mean by that is when I would make new designs or launch new products, I was just launching things that I liked and not really putting data behind my decisions. I talk about this all the time. I was going to launch products, I would just launch things that I pretty much thought would work, right? But unfortunately, me, Hannah, as being a one-person data sample, is not a big enough data sample to say that this product is going to or is not going to work. And if you're investing a lot of time and money into a product or design or product development, right, you kind of want to put data behind your decisions, so then you know that you're at least putting yourself in the best case scenario for that product. To combat this, I highly recommend using tools like Sales Samurai. Sales Samurai will actually get keyword search volume for you. It will tell you, what keywords are getting what amount of searchability every month. This is super big because you want to go after products where a lot of people are searching for them. Otherwise, why would you spend a bunch of time, money, and energy launching products that nobody's searching for, right? Another thing that I use Sales Samurai for is it will show me who's at the top. So what listings are getting the most views for the keywords that I want to go after. And that gives me a lot of key KPIs about, what value propositions I'm going to need to have, what type of quality I'm going to need to have, what price point I can justify my price to be at based off of what my competitors are doing, right? Sales Samurai does a lot of different things for you. The two big ones that I use it for is keyword research and then also competitor analysis. And obviously the listings that are getting the most views are getting a lot of views for a reason, right? So I want to make sure that I'm building competitive listings and competitive products based around what the market's telling me, not just what Hannah thinks is going to work. So I highly recommend you guys check out Sales Samurai. I have a link in my description. You can also use code ETSY for 20% off. And drum roll, please. This one is the biggest profit-losing mistake that I have made since I've been an entrepreneur. So, when my business was at an all-time high, what did Hannah do? Instead of doubling down on what was working, I got infected with something called shiny object syndrome. If you've never heard that term before, essentially what it means is, as an entrepreneur, this is very common. Basically get your business to a point where you're very comfortable, you think you're the king of the hill, that you're untouchable. And essentially what happens is your eyes start roaming around, you start networking, you start meeting other entrepreneurs and seeing what everybody else is doing and thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. So again, instead of doubling down on what was working, I got involved in like 4 other business ventures at the same time. And I did this at a time, yes, my business was at an all-time high. I got my business to a point where it was running itself, but it wasn't growing by itself, right? It still needed me to do the design work, research and development for new product launches, right? And that's a huge part of the business engine, right? And so I neglected that to get involved in buying real estate and doing Airbnbs and learning how to flip land and getting into Amazon FBA and then maybe opening up another Etsy shop. Pretty much anything to distract me from the business that was making the most money. And this is a huge killer business. This is actually super common. Boredom in business is very common. And when you think you're getting bored and you have an asset that's doing well, the worst thing you can do in that moment is get involved in a new business venture, because whether you want to believe it or not, it is going to make you neglect that first child. And unless that child is 18 years old and, like I said, is growing by itself and running by itself, essentially it doesn't require more than 5% of your effort, because you have just completely systemized out all of your parts of your engine with employees, with SOP processes, with higher level processes, right? Because design work and our research and development is a very higher level skill than just like packaging orders, right? Until you've completely offloaded all of those parts of your business, I would not even consider getting into any other business venture other than like investing in the stock market, maybe, because that requires literally no effort, right? My first business suffered. It suffered immensely. And as you saw on my channel, we actually had a suspension at the height of everything while I was getting super distracted. And I think that if I wasn't neglecting my first child, maybe that wouldn't have happened, because I would have been a better leader to my team, because at the time I had 6 employees and I would have caught some of their mistakes that led to that suspension basically, and wouldn't have ended up in the position that I was in. Now, obviously, these are all learning lessons. We ended up getting the account back, proving our innocence. There's a whole video about this in my channel, but a huge learning lesson. And yeah, like I said, I highly recommend is if you're getting to a point in your business where you're pretty happy with the momentum, you're happy with the income, and you're getting bored, don't do anything other than double down on what's working, because I guarantee we were on track to do about $2 million, and yep, that didn't happen. We actually ended up doing less than the first year. And again, you can check out that video in my channel. Mistakes in business are inevitable. It's all part of this game. And you know, like they said, these lessons are what make our skin thicker. It makes us more okay with taking risk. It makes us better entrepreneurs in the long run. And yeah, I'm kind of proud of them in a sense. Excited to continue to share more as I continue to progress as an entrepreneur. But I don't know, if we want to normalize that it's okay to make mistakes, go ahead and comment your biggest mistake down below, and we will give you some love, because it's okay. Overall, guys, thank you so much that you've stayed till the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.